I'll never forget the day I stumbled upon the rumors of Atlantean gardens. It was as if the whispers of the forest had finally caught up with me, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. The Amazon rainforest has always been a place of mystery and awe, but this was different. This was about something that lurked just beyond the edge of perception, waiting to drag the unwary into its abyss. I'd spent years researching the legends and myths surrounding the gardens. They said it was a portal, a gateway to a realm where the laws of reality no longer applied. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures lurking in the underbrush, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. Others spoke of strange plants and flowers that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. As a journalist, I've always been drawn to the darker side of human nature. And what was more sinister than the possibility of a place where the very fabric of reality was torn apart by some ancient evil? It wasn't until I received a cryptic message from an unknown source that I finally found myself standing at the entrance of Atlantean gardens. The trees seemed to close in around me like sentinels, their branches tangling overhead like skeletal fingers. A chill ran down my spine as I pushed aside the curtain of vines and stepped into the shadows. I'd brought all the necessary equipment: cameras, recorders, a first aid kit, everything you'd need for an expedition into the heart of madness. But as I looked around at the eerie silence, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was waiting just beyond the edge of sight, its eyes fixed on me with cold calculation. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my footsteps echoing through the stillness like a death knell. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their branches creaking ominously as I made my way deeper into the gardens. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything went quiet. The air was heavy with anticipation, and I knew that I was about to uncover secrets that were better left unspoken. It's been weeks since I entered Atlantean gardens, but I can still feel the weight of its presence bearing down on me like a physical force. I've tried to shake off the feeling of unease that clings to me like a shroud, but it only seems to grow stronger with each passing day. And now, as I sit here in my darkened office, staring at the grainy footage from my expedition, I know that I'll never be the same again. The trees seem to loom over me still, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, beckoning me to return to the gardens and confront whatever horrors lie within. As I ventured deeper into the gardens, my eyes adjusted to the dim light, and I began to make out the outlines of ancient structures. The air was thick with the scent of decay and rot, and the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the distant call of a bird or the creaking of twisted vines. I followed a narrow path that wound its way through the underbrush, my feet crunching on the dry leaves and twigs that carpeted the forest floor. The trees seemed to close in around me, their trunks twisted and gnarled with age, their branches reaching up towards the sky like skeletal fingers. Every so often, I'd stumble upon a crumbling stone wall or a toppled statue, covered in vines and moss, as if nature was trying to reclaim the ruins for itself. I felt like an intruder, trespassing on a place that was better left forgotten. But my curiosity got the better of me, and I pressed on, eager to uncover the secrets that lay hidden beneath the surface. As I explored the ancient ruins, I began to notice strange symbols etched into the walls, twisted glyphs that seemed to writhe and twist like living things. They pulsed with a faint, malevolent energy, as if they were alive, watching me with cold calculation. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that I was not alone in the gardens. Something was here with me, something that did not want me to uncover its secrets. But I pressed on, driven by a morbid fascination with the unknown. And then, suddenly, I stumbled upon a clearing, a vast, open space surrounded by towering trees and filled with a sea of twisted, nightmarish plants. The air was heavy with an otherworldly presence, and I felt myself being drawn towards the center of the clearing, as if some unseen force was pulling me towards its heart. And that's when I saw it, a massive stone structure in the center of the clearing, covered in more of those twisted symbols than I'd ever seen before. It loomed over me like a monolith, casting a long shadow across the forest floor. I felt a sense of awe and trepidation as I approached the entrance to the structure. It was as if I was standing at the threshold of some ancient, forbidden knowledge. And then, just as I reached out to touch the stone, everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the forest floor, my head throbbing with pain and confusion. The clearing was empty, but I knew that I had seen something that I would never be able to shake from my mind. As I lay on the forest floor, trying to make sense of what had happened, I slowly sat up and looked around. The clearing was empty, but I could have sworn that I saw a figure standing just beyond the edge of perception. It was as if my mind was playing tricks on me, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I stumbled to my feet and began to make my way back towards the entrance to the stone structure, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached out to touch the stone, I felt a presence behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. The air seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel eyes upon me. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I turned back towards the entrance, I saw a figure standing just beyond the edge of the clearing. It was tall and gaunt, its face twisted into a grotesque grimace. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and I could feel its malevolent presence washing over me like a cold wave. I tried to run, but my legs were frozen in place. The figure began to move towards me, its pace slow and deliberate. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak as it drew closer and closer. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The figure vanished into thin air, leaving me standing alone in the clearing. But I knew that I wasn't alone. I could feel its presence still, lurking just out of sight. I stumbled backwards, my heart racing with fear, and fell to the ground once more. This time, I lay there for what felt like hours, unable to move or speak. It was as if I had been petrified by some unseen force. But eventually, I managed to crawl to my feet and stumble back towards the entrance of the stone structure. As I emerged from the ruins, I saw a figure waiting for me in the distance. It was the same gaunt figure I had seen before, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. But this time, it spoke to me in a voice that was like nothing I had ever heard before. "You should not have come here," it said. "Now you will never leave." As I stood there, frozen in fear, the figure began to move closer. Its eyes seemed to bore into my soul, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The world around me began to distort and blur, like a painting smeared by a wet brush. I stumbled backwards, trying to escape the figure's gaze, but it only moved faster, its presence closing in around me like a shroud. And then suddenly, I was flooded with visions, disjointed images that seemed to flash before my eyes like a madman's sketchbook. I saw myself standing in a desolate wasteland, surrounded by twisted metal and burning debris. A figure loomed over me, its face hidden behind a mask of blackened steel. I tried to scream, but my voice was silenced by some unseen force. The vision shifted, and I found myself back in the clearing, but everything was different. The trees seemed to twist and writhe like living serpents, their branches grasping for me like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, and I could feel my own sanity begin to unravel like a thread pulled from a sweater. The figure moved closer still, its eyes blazing with an unnatural light. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. I stumbled backwards, collapsing onto the ground in a heap of trembling limbs. My mind reeled with the implications of what I had seen, or rather, not seen. For all that I knew, these visions were mere tricks of the mind, born from some deep wellspring of psychological trauma. But as I looked up at the figure which stood over me like a dark specter, I felt a creeping sense of dread that this was far more than just the product of my own fevered imagination. The figure began to speak, its voice like a sigh on the wind. "You have seen the truth," it said, "and now you will never be able to escape." As it spoke, the world around me seemed to warp and twist once more, until everything was nothing but a madman's canvas of distorted colors and sickly lights. I stumbled back to the ruins, my mind reeling with the visions I had seen. But as I approached the entrance, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A group of explorers, armed and equipped for adventure, were gathered around the stone structure. They looked like they had been here for weeks, maybe even months. Their clothes were tattered and dirty, and their eyes had a haunted look about them. One of them caught my eye, a woman with a scar above her left eyebrow and a look of determination etched on her face. She beckoned to me, and I felt a surge of hope that perhaps these people could help me make sense of what was happening. But as I approached the group, they turned to me with a mixture of fear and suspicion. "Who are you?" one of them asked, their voice laced with hostility. I explained my situation, but they just looked at each other, whispering among themselves. The woman with the scar stepped forward, her eyes locked on mine. "We're the ones who have been searching for whatever it is you've seen," she said, "but we never expected to find anyone else." She introduced herself as Dr. Maria Rodriguez, a renowned archaeologist, and explained that they had been searching for an ancient civilization deep in the heart of the forest. They had encountered strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena, but nothing could have prepared them for what I had seen. As I listened to their story, I realized that we were all in this together, trapped in a web of mystery and terror that seemed impossible to unravel. The group told me that they had been tracking the figure with the glowing eyes, trying to understand its motivations and purpose. But as we spoke, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were being watched, that the figure was waiting for us just out of sight, biding its time until it struck. Suddenly, Dr. Rodriguez's radio crackled to life, broadcasting a message from an unknown source. "This is the research team Alpha," it said. "We have encountered something. Please stand by." The group exchanged worried glances, and I knew that we were about to embark on a journey into the very heart of madness. I stepped cautiously through the underbrush, my eyes scanning the ground for any sign of danger. The group had decided to split up and search for more clues, hoping to find some answers about what was happening in this forsaken place. As I walked, I noticed that the trees seemed to be growing closer together, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. I pushed aside a branch, revealing a small clearing surrounded by a tangle of vines and creepers. In the center of the clearing stood an old backpack, its straps frayed and worn. Next to it lay a first aid kit, its contents spilling out onto the forest floor. I knelt down to examine them, wondering who could have left this behind in such a state. But as I reached for the radio, I heard a faint humming noise coming from inside the backpack. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it up, revealing a collection of strange artifacts. There was a small, leather-bound book with pages filled with cryptic symbols and diagrams. A set of earplugs, which seemed out of place in this desolate environment, and a small, crystal orb that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized that these items must have belonged to the team that had been searching for whatever it was we were searching for. I carefully picked up the book, feeling its weight in my hands. The symbols seemed to shift and writhe on the pages like living things. I flipped through them, searching for any clues or patterns. But as I did, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. It was as if the symbols were watching me, waiting for me to make some kind of mistake. Suddenly, the humming noise stopped, and an oppressive silence fell over the clearing. I knew that I had to get out of there, but my feet seemed rooted to the spot. And then, I heard it. A low, rasping voice speaking a language I couldn't understand. It was coming from inside the backpack, and it was getting closer. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I stood there, frozen in fear, the voice inside the backpack spoke again. This time, its words were clearer, more urgent. "Warning, do not proceed. Danger ahead." I spun around, looking for any sign of movement, but the clearing was empty. The trees seemed to loom over me, casting long, ominous shadows on the ground. I knew I had to keep moving, but my legs felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. Suddenly, a piece of paper fluttered out of the backpack and landed at my feet. I picked it up, examining it with a sense of trepidation. The message was scrawled in hasty handwriting. "They're not what they seem. Be careful who you trust." Below that, someone had scribbled a crude map leading to a location deep in the forest. I felt a surge of fear as I realized that this must be some kind of trap. But I knew I had to keep moving, had to find out what was going on and why. The voice inside the backpack spoke again, its words dripping with malevolence. "You should have listened." I took off running, my heart pounding in my chest. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees twisting and writhing like living things. I stumbled through the underbrush, following the map to the location marked on it. As I ran, I felt a sense of disorientation, as if my very perception of reality was being turned upside down. The voice inside the backpack seemed to be laughing at me, its laughter echoing through my mind. And then, suddenly, everything went black. I came to, my head throbbing with pain. I was lying on the forest floor, surrounded by an eerie silence. The trees seemed to loom over me, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch me back. I struggled to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over me, forcing me back down. As I lay there, my mind began to reel. Memories flooded my consciousness, fragments of conversations, snippets of arguments, and snippets of laughter. But they were all disjointed, meaningless. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the world had tilted on its axis and I was lost in a sea of confusion. The voice inside my head spoke again, its words like a mantra repeating in my mind. "You're not who you think you are." I tried to shake it off, but it only seemed to grow louder, more insistent. I stumbled to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. The forest seemed to stretch out before me like an endless labyrinth with no clear path or exit. Panic set in as I realized that I had no idea where I was or how I got there. The last thing I remembered was following the map. But this wasn't on it. This was something else entirely. Something darker, something more sinister. I stumbled forward, driven by a desperate need to escape. But with every step, my grip on reality seemed to slip further away. The trees seemed to close in around me, their branches tangling together above my head like a prison cage. And then, everything went black once again. As I lay there, my mind began to wander through memories that weren't quite mine. I saw myself as a child, playing in a sun-drenched meadow, laughing with friends who were now strangers to me. I saw myself as a teenager, arguing with parents who had long since passed away. And I saw myself as an adult, standing at the edge of this very forest, about to embark on a journey that would change my life forever. But these weren't just memories. They were echoes, whispers of events that had shaped me in ways I couldn't begin to understand. The voice inside my head spoke again, its words like a gentle breeze rustling leaves. "You're not who you think you are." I tried to shake it off, but the echoes grew louder, more insistent. I saw myself as a scientist, working tirelessly to unlock the secrets of the universe. I saw myself as a warrior, fighting against an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And I saw myself as a dreamer, chasing after visions of a world that was yet to come. The echoes grew clearer, more defined. I realized that they were trying to tell me something, that I had been here before in this very forest, but not for the reasons I thought. I had come seeking answers, but what if those answers were just illusions? What if everything I thought I knew was a lie? The voice inside my head fell silent, leaving only the echoes to haunt me. And then I heard it, a faint whisper in my ear. "You're not who you think you are." But this time it wasn't just a voice. It was a name that sent shivers down my spine and made my heart skip a beat. Emily. As I heard the name Emily, everything around me began to distort and blur. The trees seemed to twist and writhe, their branches like grasping fingers. The air grew thick with an otherworldly energy that felt like a physical presence, pressing down on me. And then I saw her, Emily, standing before me with eyes that burned like stars in the darkness. She reached out a hand, and I felt a jolt of recognition, as if I had known her all my life. "Welcome home," she said, her voice like music. "You've been waiting for this moment for so long." As she spoke, her eyes seemed to draw me in like a moth to flame. I felt myself being pulled towards her, helpless to resist. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the forest floor, my head throbbing with pain. Emily stood over me, her eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. "You're mine now," she said, her voice like a sigh of contentment. "Your soul is mine." As she spoke, I felt it happening, a slow, creeping sense of emptiness that spread through my chest and up into my mind. It was as if my very essence was being pulled out of me, leaving nothing but a hollow shell in its wake. I tried to scream, but my voice was barely a whisper. "No," I said, but it was too late. The darkness closed in around me, and I felt myself being consumed by an eternal void. The last thing I remembered was Emily's face, her eyes burning with an otherworldly hunger. And then there was nothing. I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, with no escape from the abyss that had consumed my soul. I felt like I was falling, plummeting downwards into an eternal void of darkness and despair. The last thing I remembered was Emily's face, her eyes burning with an otherworldly hunger. And then nothing. No pain, no fear, just an endless silence, until I heard it. A voice whispering my name in a language that was both familiar and yet utterly alien. "Emily." It was me, or at least a part of me, a part that had been consumed by the abyss. I tried to respond, but my voice was barely a whisper. I'm here," the voice laughed, a sound that was like nothing I had ever heard before. "You're not here," it said. "You're just a shadow of what you once were." I felt a surge of anger mixed with a deep sadness. Who was this voice, and why did it seem to know me so well? The voice continued to taunt me, feeding my fears and doubts. "You'll never be whole again," it said. "You'll never be free." And then everything went black. When I came to, I was standing in a vast, empty space. The walls were made of nothingness, the floor was a void of darkness, and at the center of it all I saw the abyss. A great swirling vortex that seemed to pull me in with an irresistible force. I tried to resist, but it was no use. I felt myself being drawn towards it like a moth to flame. And then I was inside the abyss, where there was only darkness and nothingness. The last thing I remembered was the voice, whispering my name one final time. "Emily." And then everything went black. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, my body broken and battered. I had no idea how long I'd been out, or what had happened to me while I was unconscious. As I slowly came to, I realized that I was in a small, dingy room with stone walls and a cold, damp floor. There was a single torch on the wall, casting flickering shadows around the room. I tried to sit up, but a wave of pain washed over me, forcing me back down. My head was throbbing, my body aching all over. I tried to remember how I'd gotten there, but my memories were hazy and unclear. The last thing I remembered was falling into the abyss, feeling myself being pulled apart and put back together again. But that had been hours ago, or days, or weeks. I had no idea how much time had passed. Panic set in as I realized that I might be trapped here forever. I tried to call out for help, but my voice was barely a whisper. The door creaked open and a figure loomed over me. It was Emily, but she wasn't the same person I'd met before. Her eyes were black as coal, her skin pale and drawn. She reached out a hand and I flinched away from it. "Welcome back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're home now." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry and swollen. Emily leaned in close, her breath cold against my ear. "You'll never leave this place," she whispered. "This is where you belong." And with that, everything went black again. When I came to, I was alone in the room. The torch had been extinguished, leaving me in total darkness. I lay there for what felt like hours, listening to the sound of my own heartbeat. And then I heard it. Footsteps outside the door. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. They were coming closer and closer until they stopped right outside the door. I held my breath, waiting for whatever was on the other side to enter. And then everything went black once more.